Let's go back to our top story now. US President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. Sami Hamdi is the editor-in-chief of the International Interest and an experienced geopolitical risk consultant. He joins me now from London. Sami, thank you so much for joining us. So much to unpack here. Iran is such a key player in the region, which is why you believe Obama pursued this deal in the first place. How do you think then this decision is going to play out in the Middle East and in terms of sort of US influence in the region?
I think there's a lot of talk about why Trump has withdrawn from this deal, all this talk about the nuclear weapons, about the ballistic missiles and the like. But the reality is on the ground, what I don't think Trump has realized is the reason why Obama pursued this deal in the first place. Bush tried an antagonistic approach with the Iranians, and he found himself paralyzed in Iraq. He found himself paralyzed in Lebanon. He found himself paralyzed in Syria. When Obama came, instead of the stick approach, he tried the carrot approach. In other words, by enticing Iran to come back into the international community, softening their hardline approach, he could maybe secure some concessions in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in Syria. I think with regards to Donald Trump, I don't think he realizes the extent to which he actually needs Iran. In Iraq, Iran continues to dominate. It's the parties that it backs dominate all of the domestic institutions. The militias, the Iranian-backed militias are about to be incorporated into the army. The Assad regime has survived solely because of the Iranian militias prior to the introduction of the Russian forces. Hezbollah is the winner of the recent Lebanese elections, is the real de facto winner. In other words, they're now controlling Lebanese politics. So if Trump wants to do anything in the region, inevitably he's going to have to sit down with the Iranians. And how are the Iranians going to trust him when he has withdrawn from the nuclear deal? How will they trust anything that he says? Not only that, what leverage does Trump have on Iran now? He has no leverage on Iran in Iraq. He has no leverage on Iran in Yemen, no leverage on them in Syria. We can see the disaster that the US has done in Syria. It's clashed with Turkey, it's clashed with Russia, it's clashed with Iran, clashed with the Assad regime, it's clashed with France, it's clashed with Germany. So the reality is, I think this is a bravado. Trump thinks he's doing something great, something grand, without realizing he's put himself in a very difficult mess that he's going to struggle to get out of.
I'm interested, how do you think this is going to play out in Iran? Because Hassan Rouhani faced some criticism when he signed on to this deal. And now, you know, obviously the US has withdrawn. It's not a good look. How do you think this is going to play out on the ground in Iran?
I think it's a big boost for the hardliners, for the conservatives who say the West, they don't want us. They hate us because we are Iranians. They hate us because we are Persians. They hate us because we are strong. Now they've been bolstered. The likes of Rouhani, who came and said we should talk with the West, we should go for democracy, we should go for a greater rapprochement. Now he is weak because now he looks in front of his people. We tried to talk with the West, and the West, they backstabbed us. They withdrew from the nuclear deal. He may say that the Europeans at least are trying to keep the peace, but in everybody's eyes, the Europeans look weak. Macron went to Washington to try to convince Trump, and he failed. Merkel went to Washington and tried to convince Trump, and they failed. Europe is trying to appease Trump. In other words, Rouhani is going to have a very difficult time looking his people in the eye and telling them we should continue to negotiate with the West. On the contrary, those supporters who were sitting on the fence saying maybe we should try negotiations, they are going to be looking at each other and saying, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we're going to have to rely on our own resources, on our own force, maybe the Chinese, maybe a bit closer to the Russians, but maybe we need to, our interventions in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe we should stay there because the way the US is acting, this gung-ho approach, this bullying approach, we need something to knock the US down a notch. Otherwise, we're going to be destroyed. In other words, when the hardliners say that Iran is facing an existential threat from the US, Trump has given them a very good piece of evidence that they can use to the Iranian people.
Why do you think we've seen the reaction that we have so far from the Iranian side? I mean, there was every indication that Iran would go, OK, we're done, we're out of this deal too, we're no longer going to abide by the terms of this deal. Instead, Rouhani has said, OK, we'll take a couple of weeks, we'll speak to the Europeans, we'll see if Iran can continue to be in this deal and continue to benefit from this deal. Why do you think we've seen that response?
I think because the Iranians are not quite sure what to do and what the stance of the rest of the countries will be. They're not sure how Turkey is going to react. They're not sure how the Russians are going to react. They're not sure how the Europeans are going to react. In other words, they're not sure who are the allies and who are the enemies. They need a bit of time to see who is going to stand with the Iranians and who is going to stand with the Americans. It's more a realignment of these particular interests. Moreover, let's flip the question. What do you expect Iran to do? Did we expect Iran to declare war on the US and march on, I don't know, the Udeid base in Qatar and Incirlik base in Turkey? No, they would never have done that. What should Iran do differently? They're still involved in Syria. They're still fighting. They're still in Iraq, heavily involved in the elections, and the militias are about to be incorporated into the army. Their proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, has just won an election. In other words, far from looking like a defeated party, Iran is actually winning in the region. In other words, contrary to the headlines that we're seeing that this is a devastating blow to the Iranians, the reality on the ground suggests that Iran doesn't need to do anything. It's on an upward trajectory, irrespective of whether the deal continues or not. So in other words, it has the luxury of being able to say, look, we're going to wait until things calm down. We're going to speak to our allies, because irrespective, we're winning. So at some point, Trump is going to have to talk to us. Europe is going to have to talk to us. We don't need to go to war. We know you're coming to Tehran. And I think that's the Iranian approach, and that's the reason why we're seeing a very cautious, very diplomatic tone coming out of Tehran.
Always good to get your analysis. That's Sami Hamdi, the editor-in-chief of the International Interest, live from London.